I'd love to know just how you manage to prioritize everything. And you have 4 kids, right? So you got a lot of you got a lot of things going all at the same time. What's your secret?
I mean, it's a trick of your brain to think that you need more time than you do. You don't have time to get white page syndrome. You just have to put something down.
Right.
When you start to feel like maybe I should give up, that's when you really shouldn't, because probably things are just going to come through the pipe any minute.
It still took me 9 months to get that first deal. I was very close to giving up. How did you learn, like in the early days, how to write? I mean, you said that you've always liked writing.
I would tell a beginner is to let yourself be a beginner. Let yourself be bad so that you can be good. Copywriting also has, I think, much more psychology in it than content writing.
Many, many good writers, they have a big red pen that just goes all through the writing.
If you get to a point where people are telling you that your writing has no weaknesses, you're probably with the wrong people. By not giving up, you will get there, because other people will give up and you're just refusing to concede.
There are a lot of business owners that are more compelled to work with someone like you because you've got life experience. When you first broke into copywriting from content, how did you get in with that first few businesses?
It's not harder than a newborn. It really isn't. Like, the healthier secret answer is that
Today I'm here with Julianna Carrillo. It's nice to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. So you've been writing for about 8 years now, and copywriting specifically for 3 years, and you've worked with lots of different businesses of different sizes and juggled a lot of things as well during the journey. I mean, when we first started working together, you were working on your master's, and now you're doing a lot more. You're writing copy a lot more than before as well. So yeah, I'd love to know just how you manage to prioritize everything. And you have 4 kids.
I do.
So you got a lot of you got a lot of things going all at the same time, and you're able to manage all those priorities.
So I have to preface and say that my boys are good boys, so it makes it a lot easier when you have good kids. But and I think the biggest thing is that you learn to not procrastinate. So there's not a lot of wasted time, and if I'm giving myself an hour to do something, I really use the full hour and work to get as much done in that hour as possible, because anyone with a kid would be able to tell you that it's always plan B. Like there's someone's gonna get sick tomorrow every time. So you don't wait until the last minute to get started.
You have 4 boys, right?
All 4 boys, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of energy and
there's a lot of testosterone.
Disrupt you?
Yeah. Like, I don't have any brothers. Yeah. It was a learning curve for sure to throw things at my brother's head is essentially what every game turns into. So
do they not disrupt copywriting sometimes? And like while you're in the flow, like how do you stay in flow and like get deep work done?
So I think there is that challenge that, yes, when you have children, especially younger children, and if you're not putting them in daycare all the time, which mine weren't, you are going to be interrupted. So for a large portion of my early writing, it couldn't be full-time because you're writing in the cracks of the day. Like you're staying up late, you're getting up early, and you're doing the deeper writing when you have a better guarantee of being uninterrupted. And then you can do smaller work, the editing, the reaching out to people, the sort of the admin when they're awake and with you. But, as they get older, they can give you more minutes before you get interrupted. So I feel like maybe I'm reaching a sweet spot now. The youngest is 6. So like.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't have any kids. So, I mean, it'll be difficult for me to understand, but I've coached quite a few people with kids. And one thing I've definitely noted is that when you have a lot of constraints or a lot of, like you're forced to work in certain blocks, you tend to get the work done. And it's like when I worked in an in-house role, when I first got started, I got a lot more work done in the same amount of time as maybe it would take me today to get work done. Like I could do it in 2 days, whereas today might take me 3 days, just because I was under the pressure to complete it in that time. So I've always found that really interesting about deadlines. Like when you only have a certain amount of time, you're just more effective or more efficient.
Yeah,
So,
I 100% agree. I mean, it's a trick of your brain to think that you need more time than you do, and I think, um, maybe part of it is you stop waiting for the perfect sentence and you just write a sentence, and then you don't have time to get white page syndrome. You just have to put something down,
yeah.
and then once you do that, it gets easier to edit. You can edit it and make it better on the second pass, but you need to get started. There's no you don't have the luxury of waiting around.
Mm. Do you sometimes end up working like away from the computer, just in your head, like while you're doing other things? And it's like maybe that also helps to refine the writing, because a lot of writing for me is not even on the page. It's a lot of just sort of thinking about what I'm trying to say, how I'm trying to say it, the that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. At least for me, I agree with that sentence too. I feel like the creating the idea is the harder part, and once you have that, then the words sort of tumble out themselves. And so, for
Mm.
me, I think it comes from a place of doing something that feels mindless, but is distracting enough that you're sort of, it's like percolating in the back of your mind. It's there, but you're not actively thinking about it. So like, laundry or working out or cleaning the pantry or something. It's enough
Hmm.
of using another part of your brain that the rest of it is still thinking about it. And then when you sit down, you have better ideas.
Mm. You mentioned that your youngest is 6 right now.
Yeah.
So if I do the math, you started 8 years ago. You started when your kids were very young,
Yeah.
and you managed to get your career started while they were very, very young. How did you? I mean, I coach some people, as you know, in the dojo that are 18 and they're struggling because even though they have, let's say, 12 hours a day and their mom's making dinner for them and all they have to do is gym and do work, they still struggle for months to get clients. And yet you're able to be a mom and juggle these priorities and launch a career. Like, what's your secret?
So the real secret is that I don't sleep very much. But the healthier secret answer is that I think it really is consistency. And I will say that still getting a new client is where I would put the biggest struggle, because it feels like the biggest lift to do the research, to find the ideal clients, to create an email or outreach that's going to work and follow up is still the hardest part, but it is the most important part. And I think um, yeah, it just goes back. I mean, it's what I want to do. And so having had other careers and other jobs, and knowing a quote unquote good life from one that's more of a struggle, this is what I want to do. And so at some point you have to prove it by following through for yourself.
I found a lot of people in the early days, they struggle with the clarity of like what exactly they should do, so that they don't really do anything. Um, how did you combat that, like when you first got started? Because there's a lot of stuff to learn, and then of course because you were busy as well. I mean, you were consistent, but was there a point where you knew what you needed to do and then started doing it, or did you just kind of figure it out as you went along, or how did that work?
I think it's a little bit of all of those. I found some good beginning coaches or good beginning guides and sort of did what they said. And when you hit a roadblock, you figure it out on your own, depending on what it is, or you level up the coaching, or try a different approach. And I think too, it's also finally getting to a place where it doesn't have to be perfect.
Hmm.
Um, there are other writers who are just as good as you, or not as good as you, who are finding clients and getting work. So you just sort of have to believe that there are 5 people in the world who would hire you to write for them. And so, okay, not this 5, the next 5, not this 5, the next 5, and keep
Hmm.
going until you find your people. And I think too, I guess I firmly believe that when it gets hard, the success is closer. Like, so when you start to feel like maybe I should give up, that's when you really shouldn't, because probably things
Mm.
are just going to come through the pipe any minute.
Yeah, that's definitely the case with copywriting for sure. I mean, I can look back on my own experience. I had luxury of time. I had a lot of time when I got started, which is great. I'm grateful for, and I didn't. I mean, I did have a part-time job at the coffee shop, but for the most part, I was just available to do my work. And still took me 9 months to get that first deal, and it wasn't a retainer; it was a one-time deal. I got a client the month after, but I was very close to giving up. I thought to myself, I don't think I ever would have given up, but I think I was at the point where I was considering it often. I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I shouldn't do this. I think you got to have a deeper reason than just money. I've seen this pattern, at least with the copywriters that I've worked with, is everyone has something much more important in their mind or what they want that's more than just, let's say, I don't know, like a 10K or 15K. I mean, for some of the young guys, it's to move out and like live a life independently. What was your main driver for wanting to start as a copywriter and not do what you were previously doing?
Um, so I writing has always been the thing that I think I've wanted to do in some capacity or another. I've always come back to writing, and my degree is in writing. And when I graduated, it was right when newspapers were shutting down, and so my joke was always like, "It's well and good to be a starving artist until you're actually starving." And you're like, "Okay, I need to work." And
Mhm.
so I got a teaching degree, and that's what I did for a long time, and I loved it. I love sharing skills about how to read and how to write and that sort of thing, but ultimately writing kept pulling me back. And when I had young kids, it also, I knew it was a thing that I could do to contribute to the household income, but also, your mental health as a mom. And so I knew I could get enough of a client that would fulfill my need to feel like a person beyond mom, and at the same time give me the time and space I needed to do being a mom well. So it was the perfect blend of my dreams and practicality.
Nice, nice. Yeah. It is something that you don't have to do full time and dedicate your whole life to. I actually really like that about copywriting is that you can do it, let's say 3-4 hours a day and make decent income from it and have a life outside of that. We got a copywriter in the dojo, Logan. He doesn't work all day long. He does well, he's studying Japanese, sometimes in the morning. He's studying Japanese, and then at the end of the day he'll write his emails, and his end of the day is America's morning, so he gets his work done and he's living a good life like that. I was doing that for a while in 2023 as well. I was traveling and doing it, but I think there are many moms that get into this industry because they want to write copy, or maybe not even copy. They just want to be a writer from home because they get to be very available and have control over their income and their time in a way that they wouldn't if they were working like a 9 to 5. And there's a lot of programs and coaching programs out there. Like I've actually seen, when I first got started, I started with a company called AWAI. They had a course on copywriting, and there's an entire section of their website that's just dedicated to the messaging, like moms or single moms, or like yeah, just moms. Lots of like the word mom and writer like always together. So I just thought, well, here's someone that's done it. You've actually done it. You've actually achieved that, and it and did it turn out to be what you expected it to be? Like, what is yeah? Did it turn out the way you hoped it would?
It has. I mean, I think the funny thing about goals and dreams is like as soon as you get them, you're like, okay, at least for me and a lot of people I know, you sort of, okay, what's next? But
Mm.
I do love that my kids know that I was there for them for their younger years, and that, we have a very comfortable lifestyle because I was able to contribute. Um, Yeah, it is a good match, especially if you can give yourself the time to get better and to learn and to um, allow yourself to be a beginner. Then you can create a mom lifestyle that gives you a lot of freedom.
What didn't you expect copywriting to be like when you got started?
I don't think I thought it was going to be as creative. I think I thought it was going to be a lot more mathy than it can
Mm,
be, and so I do like that. And I think too, you often say it should make you laugh, and I do think that
yeah.
that's always like a good sign if I get to the end and I'm kind of like, oh, that's kind of cute, or I did that well, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's fun to know um, that your writing did that, and I think too knowing that you are working for someone or selling a product that you actually believe in is also important, so that you're not jaded from what you're trying to do.
Yeah, copywriting is very creative. It's very fun. I end up laughing a lot. One of the copywriters in the dojo was recently here in my apartment, and he stayed for a few weeks, and we were writing some project for some business owner, and it was very creative copy, and we just sat here laughing our heads off for like a couple hours, coming up with the most stupid ways to get attention, but it works. And I always enjoy that part of copywriting, and I tell people, if you find your work fun and you have a good energy about it, then it's gonna deliver in the copy. And if you don't have good energy when you write, it often transfers into your writing. How do you manage like energy when you write, especially if you're under a lot of pressure, like at home, you got to, let's say one of your kids is sick, or just like it's a bad week. How do you get through that and still deliver good work for your clients?
I think this goes back to the first idea of not waiting to the last minute. So I don't procrastinate very often. um, and I think knowing your own rhythms. So I am not a night person at all. And I'd much prefer to wake up at 4 in the morning and start writing then than to stay up till midnight and write. So knowing that I'm much more creative and on top of it first thing, um, and and rearranging your schedule to get the creative writing and then letting it flow from there. And I think too also like just knowing yourself to know like this is not happening today, and then letting yourself rest and get back to it. But you say that with a caveat because not every day can be a rest day, so at some point it's also your job. And I think that's where being a professional comes in. You are a professional writer, and while it might not be your A+ home run copy this time, you still have to have the background and the practice of writing good copy on demand. So
Hmm.
yeah, the the practice of this is what I do.
Yeah, procrastination can definitely. Well, I don't know. I find when I talk with parents, they often say, like, I don't know what I was doing with my time before I became a parent. So it's like, it just seems to be that parents have less tolerance for their own procrastination. That seems to be the pattern I've noticed. Is like before, when you don't have kids, you're like, oh, I'll work on that later. But parents are like, no, I got to do this right now. Like, this is the only 30 minutes I'm going to get before all hell breaks loose or whatever it is, you know?
Yeah, I think, yeah, if you want to know how much time you had, have another kid. Like just like I had no idea that I had that much free time.
Interesting, interesting. So how did you learn, like in the early days, how to write? I mean, you said that you've always liked writing, so maybe that part made it a little bit easier, but it's content writing and copywriting are different, right? And you spent 5 years with more content writing, and then you started doing more copywriting. So what it maybe like I'd love to know the pros and cons from your perspective of, or maybe both, and just sort of just a general perspective on the difference between the two.
Hmm. So I think the biggest thing that I would tell a beginner is to let yourself be a beginner. And even if you did write a different kind before, you didn't do this. So let yourself be bad so that you can be good, and admit that you're bad. And I think people often let their ego get in the way. But I had very harsh writing professors, like very harsh writing professors. And so you quickly learn to disassociate your self-worth with what they said about your writing. And so it made it easier to put what was arguably bad copy in front of you and let you tell me what's wrong with it so that I could be open to learning how to make it better rather than sit in my own funk and try to convince myself why you're wrong. Like letting you tell me how to make it better is huge because then you can, make it better on the next one. And I think the difference is often, I think, copywriting is much more conversational, much more casual, and content writing is much more polished. It's closer to journalism. It's closer to like academic writing, maybe, not as professional as that, but I think it's easier to go from those to content writing than it is to copywriting. Copywriting also has, I think, much more psychology in it than content writing. You're not just giving information and letting people distill it at their own time. You really are pushing them to do something. So learning the sales part of it too is important.
Yeah, I started with a bit of content writing as well, actually. When I first started, some of the projects I was doing was more content writing. And my actual first coach was very similar, but he was a copy coach more than a content coach. But he just tore my copy to pieces. And I see a pattern with good writers that many, many good writers, they have a big red pen that just goes all through the writing. And it's academic writing, but also good copywriters have that same sort of process, refinement through very, very critical, it's very critical, the feedback. And I think it's very important. Like I wouldn't ever take that back because it's very painful if you have an ego, I think, to have your whole piece of copy completely destroyed with red pen. Or now it's not really pen anymore. Maybe it's like comments on a Google Doc or whatever. But having that is necessary because it forces you to level up. And I actually had a coach that once didn't give me any clarity on didn't give me any clarity. Just highlighted the entire piece of copy and just said no. No. So I'm like, oh, okay. Okay, so it's no. So what should I do? I'm thinking to myself, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to bother my coach and ask him what I should do instead, because then because then I'm irritating him. Let me sit with this no and try to understand the meaning behind it. And I found that he told me later on, he says, I actually kind of want to, I wish I had been a little bit better as a coach. But I said to him, no, I actually think it was necessary that you were like that because you forced me to think. You forced me to be more and like analyze my own writing and like be a little bit more harsh on it. Because I think a lot of copywriters, they're very kind to their writing because they wrote it. So they're like, oh, it's pretty good. It's pretty nice. Yeah, it's quite nice. And then they don't really get to the next level because of that, because it's like, well, it's okay, but there's this that could be better, and this that could be better, and this could be better, and this could be better. And I think that's very important from a good copy coach, is somebody that can actually really cut your writing up and dissect it and analyze it and draw lines all over it. And you should embrace that. If you're watching this, it's a good thing. It's not a negative thing.
Yeah, I think if you get to a point where people are telling you that your writing has no weaknesses, you're probably with the wrong people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think that one thing I would say is that when writing gets pretty good with copy, it stops becoming about the writing and it starts becoming more about the ideas behind the writing. So it's like, hey, the way you delivered this message is pretty good. Like you could take it from a 8 out of 10 to a 9 out of 10, but a better lift would be to take the 6 out of 10 idea that you wrote this with and actually come up with an 8 out of 10 idea. So that tends to be the highest leverage point for many writers. It's like, it's not the writing that makes it the way it is. It's better if you just have a great idea, that you come up with the idea up front. So I would love to go back to what you said about waking up early at like 4 a.m. Because I'm a night person. I actually like to work in the evening. So I think everybody's got a different, different rhythm or different way that they like to work. How would you recommend to busy people, maybe moms in particular, how to find that sort of rhythm for themselves that they can, apply to building a copywriting skill or service?
I think it's just being honest with yourself that your daytime hours are not going to be ideal. So it's silly to think that you're going to have huge blocks of time when your children are awake, that you're going to be able to be totally focused on writing. And so then it really comes down to, do you write better in the morning or at night? And putting in the discipline to actually do it, because sleep will always be calling, the laundry will always be there, whatever it is can take precedent. And I think, we're still sort of conditioned that if you're a good mom, you put everybody else first. But I think you also have to recognize that this is in a way putting other people first, because you are supporting your family, and like, you're never going to win the laundry game. So just put it into something that you might win, like copywriting, and actually sticking to it. And just, even if you can't do it every day. So, okay, you're starting with 3 days a week. I will stay up and I will get this done. And maybe you work better by saying, I stay up until X, Y, and Z are done, or I stay up and I work until X time every day, regardless of, moving on to tomorrow's tasks if I finish early. However it works best for you. But I think you just have to hold yourself to the accountability that you would if you actually were your own boss.
So I used to write for a list, an email list, in 2023. And I don't know the exact percentage, but the messaging was mostly to single moms. So I'm imagining that it's a large amount of the list was single moms, and maybe another large part of the list was just moms as well, that were in like a family. And the thing I noticed from writing to them so often is that they don't put themselves first. That's the thing I often had to, like, the number one objection wasn't whether or not they should buy or whether or not they could afford it, or even whether or not they had time for it. It was almost like, you're not selfish for putting some time into this. It's almost the number one objection. It's like, you actually are not selfish because you're learning an important skill to build a business online so that you can be more present, or whatever it is. So how would you go about, how do you overcome that if you are a mom and you're like, oh, I want to put my family first and I just can't prioritize this? And what do you actually say to somebody like that? Like, how do you go about seeing it from a different perspective?
I think you have to be open to seeing it from a different perspective. And so so you were given talents and you were given a brain and you were given this ability to do things beyond being a mom. And I will be the first to say that being a mom is incredibly rewarding. I love a lot of it, but you're not going to win a prize for, having your kids in coordinated clothes. It really, it's not, nobody cares. And so I think you have to maybe see it too from what your kids are seeing. And maybe it's also because I have 4 sons, but I refuse to let them out into society thinking that wives and women have this one particular role, one particular dimension. And so, no, they get to see mom struggle. They get to see mom succeed. And sometimes mom has work and you need to go away. So and I think it's really important to show our kids that part of supporting the family is also supporting you and being this other person besides who picks them up or does the cupcakes or whatever it is.
Well, that's yeah, I would have never pictured it that way. That's really interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That does make a lot of sense. I think moms would resonate with that. I don't know.
I hope so.
That's yeah.
Preaching to the choir.
Definitely work for you. I mean, I should probably take some notes on this for the next time I write emails for that audience, because that's good. That's really interesting. And what else would you tell moms that are looking to get into copywriting, and just busy people in general, like maybe parents, like maybe even fathers, or people in like a corporate job that just don't have they don't believe they have the time. That's what they say. I don't have time.
I think, oh, okay, so you don't have time, so what do you have time for? So you can't maybe write 10 emails and reach out to 12 clients today, but can you write one and reach out to one? And then you start
Mm,
there. And yes, it is going to take you longer. It will take me longer to replace all of my
mm,
clients than it would take an 18-year-old person who is only responsible for themselves, but that's okay. It's not about being the first person done. It's about um, I mean, it's about taking a step that you didn't take yesterday. And it sounds trite and it sounds canned and corny, but like really, that's really what it is, because by not giving up, you will get there because other people will give up, and you're
mm.
just refusing to concede um, to society saying that you can't do it will get you there.
And we've had that conversation, right? Because we were saying, like, you know, this might take you 6 months longer, just because of the amount of other priorities that you have, and that an 18-year-old doesn't have. And that's just part of it. So it's also about managing expectations then, right? It's like, this is not going to be, especially not going to be a get rich quick, or something that can happen in 3 months if you have all those other priorities. It's like, this might actually take a year or two to get to really break into. But it's, there's a reward on the other side of that. Yeah, that's something that's difficult. I think some people don't realize that, and especially when you're a freelancer as well. It's like, if you don't have as much time available because you have other priorities that are taking up lots of time, you also got to think even further ahead, because if you lose a client, it might take somebody 2 months to get a client. It might take you 3 or 4 months to get a client, because just how much bandwidth you have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this too goes back to my earlier point, like with, when it does get hard for me, knowing that my kids are watching me not give up is definitely motivation. So like,
Mm,
and I being open with them, like they know where my business is, so that they know,
mm.
what my next goal is, so they can see that it's taking mom, 9 months to solve this, puzzle or problem or whatever it is. And like, okay, not everybody gets it in a week, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I think that's very inspiring. As a kid, to see, mom or dad progress and achieve the goal, it's something that the family can celebrate. I think that's very cool. I speak like someone that doesn't have kids. I can even hear it in my own in my own voice. I'm just like, oh, this is a different world to me. But a lot of people do get, a lot of copywriters that have children, and some copywriters are having children now as well, that I've been coaching, and actually three this year all had their first kid, and they're telling me just before the baby's born, they're like, what do I do to scale? What do I do to grow right now? Because I'm scared I'm not going to have any time. I'm like, I guess just prioritize, don't procrastinate, learn the skills, double down on relationships. Yeah, I think just what we've been talking about, really. It's gotta want it bad enough.
I think so, and know that it's possible. Like it's not. I mean, to be honest, copywriting enough to have an income that supports a family is not groundbreaking, you know,
Mm.
news. It's like you can do it. It's not an impossible dream, and so you just, yeah, step by step, and making sure that you are taking steps. And I think too, yeah, so like that can open up a whole other avenue of the conversation. Just what is a step? Like,
Mm.
for me personally, I can get very very attracted to reading about how to do better rather than doing the thing that actually makes me better. So I have to watch that in myself. Like, okay, have you actually reached out to those clients or followed up instead of reading about the best way to follow up,
Right.
So knowing what
Yeah,
your own
that's definitely
personal,
part of it.
yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, just knowing what your own personal pitfalls are and like, okay, maybe you fell into one today, but there's that saying, you can have a bad minute, but don't have a bad hour, have a bad hour, but not a bad day. And so just knowing that,
Right.
okay, I had a bad day, it's time to like hold myself more accountable and actually do the thing tomorrow.
Yeah, doing it versus reading about it, I think, is definitely something that people have a hard time with, especially if you've used so much of your energy already. I think it makes it much more difficult. Like, if you're that 18-year-old that's got all your time, you really don't have excuses if you're watching this, because it's like, come on, you have so much bandwidth. But also, if you're, let's say, 18 and you have a lot of free time and you're not at university or something, it's like you can afford to mess around for 2-3 hours reading random stuff and consume information and then start taking action afterwards, and you'll still make a lot of progress. But if you have kids or you have a very demanding job or you just have a very demanding situation, it's like, how much time are you going to use to consume stuff that can be a trap, is to just go into this like never-ending learning loop, and this learning loop is a lot of copywriters or fans of copywriting that I've seen. They'll like message me and they like kind of want to know a bit about my coaching, and I ask them a bit about themselves. They haven't really got started, but copywriting's interesting to them, but they've also been, it's been interesting to them for 2 or 3 years already. So it's clearly just some sort of thing that they read about and don't really like make a dent into with any action, and I think that's a pitfall. But there's an opportunity that I think I've definitely noticed this when I chatted with you about it. Is like, there are a lot of business owners that will actually prefer to work with someone who has a lot of responsibilities, that you might actually get clients that new copywriters can't get. And I've seen a lot of new copywriters try and close a client that's very successful, and they're not so interested because they're just, oh, what do they know? They're like 18, they got no life experience. But they might be more compelled to work with someone like you because you've got life experience. They might even have kids and they want you to be able to write for their business,
I think so. I think that maybe it's age and maybe it's the fact that I've got, 4 kids. There is something to be said for knowing that you're not going to waste time during the day or even with them. Like, I'm not here to play around. I like, either we fit or we don't fit. It's fine either way, but like, let's just cut to the chase. I'm not trying to date you. Let's just move on.
Yeah.
And I think there is that ability that you get at when you have experience and children, that you're just, if it's not moving me forward, even if you're thinking about it just as your house and your family, if it's not moving us forward, then I don't really have the time for it. So I do think business owners think that way about their businesses.
Yeah, I think so for sure. I think a lot of the time, yeah, just that somebody's serious, somebody's going to take this seriously, and not just somebody floating around in Southeast Asia, like on the beach. Not to say that that's a bad thing. I like coaching copywriters like that too, but some business owners don't exactly want. I actually chatted with someone last week, Julianna, like that was they was looking for an email copywriter, and they said to me, I don't really want to work with someone, Matthew, that, because I was going to introduce them to a copywriter, I don't really want to work with someone that's just sitting on the beach and uses AI to just punch out 10 emails and kind of send it to me and then also charge me $5,000 for it. I want someone that's a team player, that's like really serious about our business and is not exactly just living this nomad life. So there's an untapped market for sure for if you're a mom, or if you're a busy parent, or like even if you're in corporate, because there's so much you can transfer. Like, I don't think people realize, if you've been in a 9-to-5 job, you have a very unfair advantage over people that have not done that. Like, a lot of people become copywriters because they don't think that there's a barrier of entry, right? They're like, oh, I don't need to have a degree, I don't need to have a job or like experience, I can just enter this industry. But if you do have a degree and you do have experience in corporate, if you apply to a gig, you actually stand out from everybody else because like, oh, this person's like serious, serious consideration because they've actually accomplished some things. They've done some really hard work. This might be a really good fit versus someone that's like, oh, I don't know, they just kind of dropped out and they didn't really do anything,
I agree. I think it gives you legs to stand on, but also I think it gives you what it is to work hard. You're making, even if you're trying to move out of corporate into a full-time freelance position, you know what working hard means, and also what the company needs to succeed and that sort of thing. And you're doing it intentionally. It's not just a whim. It's not just today's flavor of the month or whatever. You're doing it because you've really looked at what you want out of your life, and you're making it a conscious decision to step away from corporate.
And you can transfer those skills. I mean, some people in corporate that become copywriters, they don't think they should put any of their previous work experience on their copy CV. It's like, no, you kind of should, because there's transferable skills there. Like if you were in HR, really leverage that, like people's person, if you're in the marketing department, even easier. If you're in a management role, any of that you can actually really leverage on a CV or in outreach. Is like, I actually used something like that when I first started. I don't know if I've told you this, but I did a course. I don't know if you would call it like an actual credit. Yeah, it was like a proper like a credit. I did it online, but I went to the University of California, Silicon Valley. I did a paralegal program with them just before I became a copywriter. So I actually was a qualified paralegal, and I can work as a paralegal and work for a lawyer. But I milked that when I first got started. I told people, like my main industry is working with legal firms. That's like my focus as a marketer and a copywriter because I'm accredited paralegal. So like I focus on helping, legal companies. But in your case, since you're not in that industry, this is more of a passion project for me. I'd love to help you with X, Y, Z. So like I try to establish my positioning with the previous thing I'd done. Even though paralegal's got nothing to do with copywriting, I found a way to tie it in and use it as a authority piece, right? And I think people don't do that enough because they think, oh, it's nothing I don't have any real copywriting experience. Like, actually, let's talk about that. I'm very curious, like when you first broke into copywriting from content writing, you must have done something to get in with that first few businesses. How did you actually do that?
So I wrote free samples and I sent them the samples, and I was able to use the samples multiple times. You can the way it was, at least when I was doing it, you could write samples for someone, send it to that person, but also say, I wrote these samples for someone else. This is how I write. This is my style. I can do this for you too. And it was enough of a showing to prove that I could make that transition from content to copy. And it worked to get those few to say yes. That would let me build a better portfolio of actual copywriting.
So early days, it's about proving that you can do it, and then you got the clients, and then what, you captured like testimonials and
had those actual live, then you have projects that actually went live, and you can show, maybe have metrics or success rates, or even if it's not a testimonial to how well the email did, at least you could say that, you're a professional and that you're easy to work with, you deliver on time, that the copy's clean, that kind of a thing, so that you are building up your network of people that have said yes to you as a copywriter rather than a content writer. And I think too, I leaned on the relationships that I had in content writing. So maybe I didn't write copy for you, but having that intro, like, hey, she's a good writer, she could probably do this for you. And then getting that soft yes, so that they would actually look at you and look at your copy and take it seriously, rather than just put you in a no pile based on whatever, like you get so many and you're just saying no to say no. Getting that warm intro, I think, is also a powerful way of making that switch.
Yeah, when you get introductions and referrals, it gets a lot easier because you have a lot less. You don't have to do all that outreach or all that application stuff, right? You have a lot of your work being handed to you in a sense, and I've had that for the last few years. Maybe last 4 years now, I've had most of my work come from referral. So I don't do mass cold outreach, or I do apply to stuff sometimes, but most of the time it's coming from referrals because of the network that you build. So, if you're listening to this, that's the other cool part, is that I think that the beginning is like much harder than once you've built some momentum. I think it's much more difficult. Like breaking in, establishing that you're good at this, getting some proof behind your name, building the network up front, it's harder. And then as you go, it gets a little bit less. The difficulty level goes down and you get better. So like they both work for you. Like it gets easier to write, network starts to pass you more deals, and you get more effective at your craft.
100%. Yeah. That's exactly what happens.
So that's hopefully encouragement if you're busy, watching this and you're busy, because it's like, well, the early day is the hardest. So if you can handle the early days, if you can handle the consistency and you can push through in the early days, this is as hard as it will be. It gets easier.
So I like to, my PSA for parents who are thinking about it is like, it's not harder than a newborn. It really isn't. Like they are much harder. And so I think, yeah. And I think too, the other thing is, again, being honest with yourself about what your skill level is. So not thinking that your copy is good, and so that you can be open to the critique and letting it get better faster is the biggest way that you're going to be able to break in more quickly as someone who might not have as much time, is by making sure that you are getting feedback that you're actually using. So.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. If you can have a child and raise a child, this is going to be, you're going to be okay.
You're going to be all right. Yeah. It's not hard.
Yeah. I don't think it's that hard. I mean, it's definitely effort for sure. But from all the people I've coached, I think there's a lot. I think there's real problems that are a lot more difficult to deal with than this stuff. I mean, you get rejected a couple of times. Okay. Maybe what's the worst that could happen? Somebody says, no, thanks, I'm not interested. Okay. You write an email for a business, or you write a piece of copy for a business. Like, here's the other thing, right? If you run the piece of copy, if you write a piece of copy and a business decides to run it and it doesn't convert, they said they like it when they accepted it. So it's like, how much of that can you really be upset about? Because they actually were happy with it. They paid you and they were happy with the result. Like, it's ultimately, unless you're running the ads for them directly, they're the one that carry that responsibility. So I think a lot of people get scared of, they get scared of, oh, I know if I do this work and it doesn't work and everything bombs. It's like, well, if the client approved of all the work, it's their business. They should be responsible for that step. And also, the right kinds of clients, they won't approve stuff that they don't think is going to help them. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to let something terrible get sent out, especially if they're an experienced business owner. What are the kind of businesses that you look to work with as a copywriter?
I like working for women because of the mom connection. Typically that does help grease wheels and sort of speak the same language at the beginning. I think too, my own particular values and mindset lets that copy come to me more easily. It's just it's a pretty natural audience to write for.
Yeah.
And I think moving forward, there are audiences that appeal to me now. So, women, female finance coaches, or female later in life health coaches type of thing, like menopause or women's health beyond your early years, I think is also interesting to me, probably because that's where I'm heading in my own life. But also, I think I'm seeing the trend of these people starting to be where women are turning. Women are starting to take more control over other areas of their life. And so finances and health in a real way are where people that I know are starting to go.
And you mentioned the coaching aspect of that, and this like personal brand aspect of that. So that's also something that you've noticed in your practice is that the personal brands is really where a lot of people are turning to get support and help in their life?
I think so. I think it's kind of a natural thing now to know that there is a coach or expert out there who could sort of help you with whatever personal or goal or whatever type of goal that you have for yourself. There's probably someone who can get you there faster. So
Yeah, I think that's the case. I mean, most of the copy these days that we write in the dojo, is mostly towards these personal brands or thought leaders, or even if it's not somebody that has a coaching program, they might have a supplement brand, or they may have some software, or maybe even, just people that have a personal brand and then they have a product behind it seems to be the best way to reach an audience today. And you see businesses that don't have a personal brand. They're sometimes paying for influencer marketing. They're sometimes paying somebody to support and sponsor their brand. Like I just think recently, I think Roger Federer was given like a $500 million or $300 million deal with Uniqlo. And so Uniqlo doesn't have a personal brand, but they're paying him. He doesn't even play tennis anymore. He's retired. They paid him like on his last year of tennis or something like $100 million just to switch from Nike to Uniqlo. And it's like, wow. So if all the biggest companies are doing that, there's a massive billion-dollar industry for us copywriters that I don't think it can be replaced by AI. What are your thoughts on the AI world taking over and getting rid of us all?
I am currently not worried. So, I think it will get better. And so perhaps, I'm not the type of person to wait for the ship to be underwater before you realize there's a problem. But at the same time, when I have seen people use it, it's pretty glaringly apparent to me that they've used it and not altered it. So I'm sure that there are people who are using it to get a skeleton and hopefully working in some personality into it. But I think the biggest drawback that I see to AI is that it doesn't have human experience. So it can't really tell you what it feels like to, you know, I don't know, it's gross, but like catch your kid throwing up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like it doesn't know what that is like, or whatever else you're writing for, that makes that deep resonation with your audience. I don't think it can do that well. Can it make the mathy part simpler? Sure, it can create the bullet points and pull out the value propositions probably, but it doesn't have that human insight to make it really a really good email.
And that's why we were leaning towards personal brands, all the copywriters in the dojo, right? Because we know that that's where the human element is. Whereas if you're selling something like just an e-com by itself, then maybe AI can do the value proposition and build the skeleton, and it's like very templatized. But with a thought leader or a personal brand, they have their own stories, they have their own voice. There's a process to capturing that. Do you incorporate AI to optimize or to like speed up the work that you do?
I do. I have a client that asks for a lot of copy, and it's a lot of repetitive copy. So, giveaways or things like that. And it's going out to business owners who, quite frankly, are not as sophisticated of an audience at this point. And so using AI to mass produce something that I've written is something that I use to get started, but inevitably it's still not quite right before I can push publish on it. There's still something that just feels wrong. And maybe it's because after you've started using them, you can see, oh, that's the AI word. You can't use delve or whatever it is without feeling like
elevate your parenting experience.
Or whatever. I mean, there are a million, and I think I'm just so aware of those sentences that I personally don't feel comfortable sending something out that I didn't change to make it
Makes
be
sense,
more mine.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I got into the industry before AI came out to the level it is today. So I learned to write everything without AI. My process was 100%. Well, I mean, the research process, but then the writing was all on the Google Doc. But now I've started to use AI a little bit more, and it's quite powerful what it's able to do, and it's enabled a lot of copywriters to take on more work and keep the quality because sometimes just tightening sentences and putting things together and it just takes a bit of mental energy, and now that part can sometimes be automated to the point where you're more guiding the message and just polishing the final product sometimes. And so I actually just thought about this now while we're chatting. It's like, well, we both got started years ago when AI wasn't a thing, but if you're starting today, this actually might be a really super boost, because if you're so busy being a parent, maybe this is actually going to help you a little bit as well, more than when I got started, when you got started, Juliana. Like, you actually can use this to help you a lot more. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think though I would caution, I guess I feel like for someone like you who started before, it's kind of like people who can drive a car without Google Maps. Like
Uh huh.
knowing how to read a real map and get someplace, using Google Maps is fine because like if it kooks out, you're not going to drive into the grocery store. But like
Yeah.
for someone who really doesn't know how to write, I think AI is not helping you grow. And so if yes, you could probably get a job, but like to really elevate your copywriting skills, you need to know that you're not going to be totally dependent on it to create ideas and to create clean copy because you
Mm.
are relying on the tool and you don't actually know what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. So it's like you can use AI, but I agree. I think that you have to be able to learn to write without having AI. But if you can write and you understand writing and you maybe had some good coaching and you've practiced a lot, then you can start to use AI and it'll actually save you a lot of time. Or maybe not even a lot of time. Like I find, to be honest, I find that AI takes me more time than writing just by myself sometimes. Like sometimes AI writes a lot faster for me, but when I'm writing an email, sometimes I don't want to use AI because I have to spend 15 minutes teaching it what I want, and then giving it feedback and being like, no, this sucks. You're not good at copy. I'd just rather write it myself sometimes, But there are a few times where it's like, okay, here's a very long story from Wikipedia about so and so who achieved such and such. Can you just make this like 5 sentences for me, like a big story, and then I get the story, and then I can continue the email, and it's like that's useful. And I will sometimes use it like that.
Yeah, I think that's it exactly. It's like an intern. You have to
Yeah.
you can't just let it off and do its own thing. And so, but I think too, it does sometimes if you are having white page syndrome, throwing something into AI and asking it to regurgitate something so that you at least, sometimes it's easier to say, this is not what I want. Like, this is a really bad email. Let me change it rather
Mm,
than trying to come up with what you think you wanted to start with.
yeah. Because a lot of copywriters, they do this. They'll sit on AI and they'll just say, I don't want this. And then AI produces something else. I'm so sorry. Here you go. It's like, oh, I don't want this. Oh, I'm so sorry. And then you just sit there for like 30 minutes just saying, I don't want this. It's like, just learn to write. What would you say is because you have a background in writing, but let's say that you've got no background. Let's say you were starting right now and let's say you're getting into copywriting or content writing. You say, okay, I want to learn how to write. What would your number one recommendation be?
I think people read it because it's about people. People are fascinated with story. So keeping the the hero, even and making the hero be transferable will help your copy right from the get-go. So make it interesting by thinking about the people in your email and or your content and trying to tell that story in whatever format that story needs to be told.
So when you say hero, you mean the subject of the content or the person you're writing it to?
Both. I think so. You're writing about a story about someone, and the reason it's interesting to the reader is because for whatever reason they can see a little bit of themselves in that person. So um, you want to you want to pull out the parts of that person's story that would resonate with your audience to keep them reading. I think something that hit home, that made this crystallize for me when I was a million years ago, was that's what Animal Planet did. When they
Mm,
first
mm.
started, they had very low viewers, but they started narrating the animals like they were human, or like giving them
Oh,
personalities, and
interesting.
all of a sudden now we need to know what the prairie dogs are going to do because we care about their family. And in the end, like, it's because we've personalized them. And so story is really, I think, very compelling all of the time.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like that a lot. Writing a good story is also something that I mean, AI can produce the general structure of a story, but it takes a talented writer to pull out the things that actually, are going to resonate and relate to the particular audience, and just put all of that together. Yeah, that's very cool. If you had to get started again from scratch today, what do you think you would do in the first few months to start building up and get a career as a copywriter?
I think the hardest part is getting someone to pay you to write. So maybe you are going to take a position or a gig that is lower paying than your goal would support, but you need to get that first one. And so, there are people that hire, like maybe a content mill, but going into it knowing that you're not planning to stay there, you're just wanting to get that forced practice, especially if you're busy, because once you have a deadline, then you have to turn something in. And so if you have nobody that you're accountable to, you can keep kicking that goal down the line. And like, okay, maybe next month I'll land that, 10K client, which, okay, great if you do. But in the meantime, you actually get better by writing. And so even if it's poor pay, being accountable to someone else for producing writing is the first step. And then in whatever time you carve out for yourself after that, then use that as the stepping stone to getting somebody that is higher up on your goal list.
I like that. Yeah, it's funny because people say that, oh, I don't want to do this $300 worth of work for just 25 bucks. But it's like, well, when you're in like a formal education program, you pay and you work. So you pay them and you work for them. So what exactly is the problem with getting paid 15 bucks to practice writing instead of, spending $5,000 on another coaching program where you could just start learning and earning? Now, of course, there's a trap maybe that some writers get into, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm going to start low. I'm going to work my way up. Eventually it gets to a point where you have enough social proof that you just got to go for the big guys. I mean, I've always said to my clients, like, and said to you, like, you got to charge 5K. You got to charge 3K. You can't be working on $200, $500 projects forever. If you need to get into the industry, and that's how you get into the industry, fine. But there's no like, oh, I'm going to grow my way up. Like you got to get that big client, and then you learn when you're working with them. You can't just. So that's, I suppose, different than formal education, right? It's like a lot of you kind of figure it out as you go sometimes as a copywriter.
I think so. I think you have to be clear-eyed about when the returns are diminishing. So you're learning and you're getting paid to learn. Even pennies, fine. You're still learning and getting that feedback. And then once you start to tip over into, this is taking up so much of my time that I cannot get a new client, then it starts to be, okay, what do I have to do to make it so that I can cut back on this hours, or cut back on this so that I can get that better client. And I think formal education, yeah, it's very often planned out ahead of time what you need to do and what you're learning. And copywriting is much more figure it out, but it's also, you're building your own business, so you have to figure that out too. It's fun.
Well, you were able to do both. You were able to do the formal process and the figure it out. Who did you need to become to be able to do the copywriting side of things?
I really don't waste a lot of time. I think one of my biggest superpower, like I joke, I bend time. I don't know. I just don't. When I've decided that this is what's going to get done, I will move heaven and hell to make it done in a block of time. And I think, honestly, to the point of, if it is taking longer, the synapses in my brain start to misfire, like, this is not acceptable, get it done. So in that way, I think, yeah, you need to not make excuses for yourself and hold yourself to a very high standard of production. If you really have multiple goals and multiple responsibilities, maybe you can cancel your Netflix membership and move on.
Yeah. I guess you just got to also really want it bad enough. And some people don't want it bad enough until something really frustrating happens. Like with my client that I used to write for, with single moms, her story, she would work all day, and then she went to pick up her son from daycare, and she caught the daycare worker smoking nearby. And that was her moment where she's like, no, I'm done with this. I'm gonna build an online business. So maybe everybody has that I'm tired of this moment. And if you don't have that yet, maybe that's what you need. But I don't know, maybe don't wait. Maybe don't wait 2 or 3 years to have that moment. Maybe just start now and just do it anyway. But I think a lot of people, they know, like when I say that, you already know there was a moment for you that you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it no matter what.
I think absolutely. And I mean, that story is so gross. I would have burned.
It's terrible. Yeah. It's terrible. I can't believe that actually happened to somebody. Yeah. It's terrible.
Yeah. We all have that point, right? Exactly. And I think maybe setting yourself up to get to that point earlier would be huge, or creating a false line in the sand. Like, okay, I don't want to have to make that commute anymore. I don't want to, I don't know, miss another holiday party at my kid's school or whatever it is. You just do it, and it becomes important. Or, look at college prices if you want to really start to panic.
That's a good one.
Have 4 children who will be adolescent boys when they.
That's scary.
The food. It's a lot.
Yeah, that's something I've actually been able to use in an email before. It's like, the average cost of education for kids in America these days. If that doesn't scare you about your income slowly not going up in a 9 to 5, I don't really know what will. And it's true. It's not just a marketing message. Like there is a lot of pressure on parents today to create something, especially with the job economy not really providing the growth that matches the price of life going up. So, if your goal is to just supplement, the income, which is a really great goal, and then you can focus on being a mom, that's great. If your goal is to establish this as a career, there's a great upside. I mean, Julianna, we don't have to talk about numbers, but I think you're doing a pretty good job, So I think you've created a great income for yourself from your work. And so a lot of people can also create a great income with copywriting, and don't have to have a 9 to 5, but you can also do this on the side of a 9 to 5. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing this perspective with everyone. I think it's been it's been interesting for me to see like how you could do it with 4 kids. I thought I was procrastinating. I think I definitely do procrastinate more than I would if I had kids. So I'm going to push myself harder from now on.
Oh, I mean, if you have the time, you have the time. I'm not suggesting that
No, I think I should. I really think I should. I think there's a lot of free time that I could use better. So.
Well, thanks. This has been super fun for me too. I appreciate the ask, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch and learn the secrets?
So my Facebook would be my full name. You can find me there, or Julianna Writes is where I live online too.
So like juliannawrites.com?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Cool. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it. It was a great call.
Take care.
Okay, take care.
Bye.